This House is now in session. We're on order number 8.
Government notices be committed.
Sir, government notices be
Government
committed.
notices, okay.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to give notice of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Amendment Bill 2019.
Thank you.
First reading of bills. Oh, sorry, sir. Reports from select committees.
Mr. Speaker, sir, pursuant to a resolution of the Honourable the House of Assembly on Tuesday, 30th August 2019, and the concurrence of the Honourable the Senate on Wednesday, 4th September 2019, a joint select committee, hereinafter referred to as a committee, was constituted to debate the Medicinal Cannabis Industry Bill 2019. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, the following persons made up the membership of the committee. Okay. The committee met on September 10th, September 24th, September 27th, October 1st, October 7th. I have the honor, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, to lay before this honorable House the report of the Joint Select Committee of the Medicinal Cannabis Industry Bill 2019, and I wish to thank all of those who participated and presented at the hearings.
I'm obliged.
Sir, first reading of bills recommitted.
Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Amendment Bill 2019 be read the first time.
The question is that the bill so mentioned be read the first time. All members in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it.
Government business resume.
Back to order number 8. Member for St. John.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of those who would have contributed to this resolution today. I also want to thank the members of staff at the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Rural Development for their effort as it relates to the work that we're trying to achieve at that particular ministry. But, Mr. Speaker, before I close, we don't have any new housing units in St. John. But in a similar vein to the Honourable Member for St. Peter, it would be remiss of me, because I know persons in Gall Hill, Port House, Clifton Hall, and Glebe-Land would want me to mention the fact that we are now being impacted in a more serious way with water outages. That having been said, I believe that resolutions will come, because this government is about finding solutions to issues and problems that are impacting all of the constituencies. Mr. Speaker, I know that the Seventh-day Adventist Church will make very good use of the facilities at Indian Ground, the old Indian Ground Primary School, and it is at this time that I beg that this resolution do now pass.
Question is that this resolution do now pass. All members in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Okay, yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that the House be suspended for 15 minutes.
Someone second it, please. Seconded. The question is that this House be suspended for 15 minutes. All members in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. This House is now suspended until 3 o'clock today. House is now in session.
Resumption of government business, sir. Order number 12, in the name of the Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness, to move the second reading of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Amendment Bill 2019.
Member for the City of Bridgetown.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I count it an honor and a privilege to be able to lead this debate in this House this afternoon. An honor and a privilege because, first of all, this is the first time for me to be so doing. And the debate and the area of the debate that we are going to be examining today is one that is of tremendous importance to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and consequently to the people of Barbados. The debate, of course, is the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Amendment Bill 2019, which would amend the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Act, Cap 54, to establish the posts of Executive Chairman, Chief Operations Officer, and Executive Director of Clinical and Diagnostic Services, and to provide for related matters. It is approaching 17 months now that I have assumed the leadership of the Ministry of Health and Wellness. And on taking up the office, I had received several calls from a lot of people in Barbados saying to me that this Ministry of Health and Wellness was perhaps the most challenging ministry within Cabinet. And when I combine that with perhaps being the MP of perhaps the most challenged constituency in Barbados, I knew that I was in for a fairly rough time. As the months rolled by, I recognized exactly what was being said to me, and I have to agree that the Ministry of Health is a very challenging ministry, and it is equally as complex. But I must also say that I have enjoyed every moment providing leadership to this ministry.
Very good.
It was indeed, and it has been, a very steep learning curve. But I've made good progress up that curve. Good progress as a result of the high quality staff that I have inherited at the Ministry of Health and Wellness. A staff whose knowledge I've been able to draw on and pull on, with persons who are committed and dedicated, and who have freely given me of their advice and expertise in their various areas of responsibility. I've also been very, very fortunate to be able to interact with the members of the board of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, a high-quality board, as I will speak to shortly, and also benefit from the advice of the management and staff at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. I have benefited significantly from the general public of Barbados, persons who had issues, complaints, persons who have been making suggestions, persons who have been hospitalized, their families and friends. It has been a learning experience for me also interacting with the unions and staff associations like the Barbados Association of Medical Practitioners, the Barbados Nursing Association, because even though we have not always agreed, I believe that I have benefited significantly from this interaction. I have benefited from the diaspora, persons outside the Barbados, Barbadians who are occupying senior positions in medical institutions across the globe, who have been giving me some great advice. I've benefited from the media, I have not always agreed with some of the headlines, but I really appreciate the fact that they have taken time to check with me whenever there were issues for me to be able to offer explanations in those circumstances which allowed me to do so. And I must say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that I will probably do something perhaps considered unusual in this chamber, to actually thank also the leader of the opposition and those persons who advise him on health matters, because I've had some very good interactions, and we will disagree on some issues, but there were a number of suggestions and a number of things that were brought to my attention, and I have been able to act on those things, and I'm really grateful for that, because at the end of the day, this is our country, Barbados, and health does not recognize political colors or political affiliations. We are dealing with a serious matter, which is the health of this nation. And this nation comprises each and every person, irrespective of any political affiliation. So I've used all that. I've listened to persons on the street and in the hospital, from janitor to manager. I have listened. And I've taken the time to reach the point where we are at, because given my background, my own training, I've been able to approach this with a discerning spirit, being able to separate intelligence from information, so that any critical decisions that I make, and some have to be made now and going forward for the benefit of this country, will not be decisions that are made based on any pie-in-the-sky vision of mine, or based on any whims or fancies, but evidence-based or intelligence-driven decisions. And that is exactly what is going to happen here today. But before I go into the meat of the debate, so to speak, I have to set the scene. I have to say that I am very proud of the board of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And why am I proud? This is a board that no one forced me to select in terms of the persons who make up the board. It's a board that represents some serious professions within this country: law, medicine, even including the Congress of Trade Unions and Staff Associations of Barbados, engineers, information communications technologists, finance, nursing, and paramedical representation as well. And this board, I did not make the decision on my own in terms of selecting the board. I listened to people whose advice I value, and I am pleased at the end of the day that I was able to take to Cabinet a board of extremely competent persons who I am sure beyond a shadow of a doubt, and Cabinet endorsed the recommendations to have the persons that we currently have sitting on the board of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. The Queen Elizabeth Hospital and the management structure, the current management structure of the hospital, comprises a chief executive officer and executive directors in support services, medical services, finance, engineering, nursing, and engineering, as I said before, yes, and those are the components of the current composition of the management staff. And that has been in place now for quite a while. But we've seen the exodus of some of the executive directors from the QEH, including the CEO. We've seen the finance director going in a different direction, and earlier the procurement manager also went his way. And so the management team at the QEH have been under tremendous stress, and the problem has been exacerbated by the exodus of members from their ranks. And so the hospital really have been going through some difficult and challenging situations. But I want to say a word here of thanks to the Prime Minister of this country in her capacity as the Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment. First of all, I don't know what got into the mind or the brain of the Prime Minister when she called me and asked me to take on the responsibility of health and wellness. And I must confess, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that I asked the question, why me? But I soon discovered why I was chosen for a task such as this. And I thank the Honourable Prime Minister for her confidence in me, but more importantly, for her foresight and vision that in spite of having a program in this country and a program with the International Monetary Fund, that the Prime Minister was able to front load some resources, one, to the Ministry of Health, and to ensure that some of the darkest days of the hospital were put to rest by giving them funds that on a regular basis that would allow the QEH to be able to plan and execute its programs. The 24-hour service was one of those programs that was designed not only to take some of the pressure off of the accident and emergency department, but also to provide another avenue for most Barbadians who cannot afford to go private to be able to access quality health care 24 hours a day. And that decision and the subsequent execution of that project, that has borne some tremendous fruit in this country. Because I'm happy to report that the first 3 months of that program, about 10,000 visits were recorded in a 3-month period at the Winston Scott Polyclinic for the 24-hour service. And I think that that says a lot. It is true that the majority of persons who attend the 24-hour service do so between about 8 o'clock in the morning and midnight. And it is also true that in the period midnight to 6 o'clock, 6 a.m., that the average so far has been about between 12 and 15 persons. And we expect the numbers to climb as we strengthen the system. But that 24-hour service is seeing patients and Barbadians from all of the catchment areas in this country, particularly from the Brantford Tate Polyclinic, Edgar Cochrane in Wildy, Randall Phillips in Oistins, and obviously the Winston Scott catchment area. And that says a lot for the 24-hour service. The service still has some improvements, in my opinion, when we are able to enhance the provision of radiological services to the 24-hour service, which is something that the QEH board is working on. That will allow for more interventions from the physicians at the 24-hour service so that it would continue to take pressure off A&E. And I thought it was really interesting that when we had the last mass casualty event a few days ago, that out of the 24 or 25 persons who were assessed to have had injuries of one kind or another, about 21 were sent to the 24-hour service. So we know that this thing is working. The Prime Minister also provided for the establishment of a post of health finance commissioner. And at the moment, the Health Finance Commissioner, in collaboration with the Health Economics Unit of the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, are in the process of doing something that is very important, not only for the Ministry of Health, but for Barbados. And we are starting to ensure that the QEH is first on the list, which is to cost every single service that persons are able to access at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And what this is going to do for us is to allow the government for the first time not to be giving a lump sum of money to the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, but to be able to advance funds to the QAH based on the cost of services that are being accessed by the people of Barbados. And in addition to that, for the first time, based on those costings, we will be able now to go after the insurance companies that provide medical insurance for those Barbadians who use the services at the QAH and for which the QAH is not recompensed by the insurance companies. So these are some of the things that have happened that have allowed us to be able to advance the cause of health care in Barbados. And I must speak to the Accident and Emergency Department. That is the physical space. About $10 million were allocated to be able to fix that, whether refurbish what we have or construct a new facility. And we have not met the deadline in this regard, and I apologize to the nation for that. But I will tell you why we haven't done so, and sometimes something that seems to be a challenge or an obstacle sometimes is a blessing in disguise. The reason why we have not been able to do what we wanted to do is because, having selected the area at the hospital for this facility, after the geotechnical study was concluded, it was determined that that area was not feasible for the project that we had in mind. And the board came back to me with an alternative. And that alternative, well, we had some discussions, and I put something else on the table which is being considered. And I can speak to that. The alternative was to set up the Accident and Emergency Department on the old Enmore site with a bridge that would connect to the main hospital. But what is on the table also for consideration is relocating the outpatient department of the QAH and one or two other departments that can stand on their own to the Enmore site and to utilize that existing space to expand Accident and Emergency Department. But I say it's a blessing in disguise, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because, look, a new building, the most fancy equipment, and all of those things will not solve the problems of providing quality health care by the Queen Elizabeth Hospital if we do not deal with the systemic issues. The hospital is more than the buildings. The hospital is more than the equipment. The hospital has to do with the people who work in the hospital, the systems and procedures in the hospital, and the level of patient satisfaction that is derived from an experience at the hospital. And those are the things that we have to spend some time to deal with in order to be able to do what is required. And I will speak to some of the issues that the QAH has been facing in recent times, and some of them are not new issues. But I want to speak to some of the good things first about the QAH. And I want to say to this Honourable Chamber and to Barbadians that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital is an institution that we should all be proud of. It has provided great service to this country. And when I was doing some research in preparation for this debate, I came across a document, thanks to the person who shared it with me. The first 15 years, 1964 to 1979, Very interesting reading. And I discovered some of the things that were done back then. And I was really impressed to see, for example, that there were a lot of scholarly articles were produced by the staff of the QEH, nursing staff and physicians, some prominent names that we know today. And that is something that I really would like to see return again. The Queen Elizabeth Hospital can become a center of excellence in this region. And if we look, for example, at some things that happen within the hospital, there's one thing that for me stands out, and that is the fact that throughout the past 30 years or so, we have done about 19 tissue and organ transplantation surgeries at the QEH. About 19. And the only reason that more have not been done is because of the unavailability of organs, and that is why I was happy to pick up something that I saw knocking around the doors of the Ministry of Health and Wellness, things that were not acted on because of an illness called implementation deficit disorder. Things in this document that are still relevant today that I have no problem in bringing to life. And so we took to Cabinet a policy dealing with organ transplantations and tissue transplantation and organ donations, and Cabinet accepted that policy, and we are in the process of doing the drafting so that that bill can come to this honourable chamber in the not too distant future. But I want to target one area of the hospital up front, and that has to do with leadership and management, because I think that is the area of greatest concern within the hospital. And this is nothing new. This was observed many, many years ago within the hospital, because it's a large hospital. And when we made the transition from the General Hospital back in 1964, there's evidence to suggest that a number of the things that we face today were recognized back then. So that we must provide a level of leadership at all levels for the hospital management and leadership, because the hospital is about people. The hospital is about people, and the most important person in the hospital is the patient. It's the patient. And managers and those in leadership positions in the hospital and the Minister of Health and Wellness must provide that level of leadership that inspires the confidence of the people who work in the hospital to be able to come to work every day, to feel comfortable doing so, and to be able to go the extra mile when that is required. Because it's by leadership that we are able to get people to do what they would not normally do on their own. So it has to be leadership that inspires confidence, and that is why we are going to be making some adjustments to the governance structure of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. But there are other issues. There are human resource problems at the hospital. Shortages of nurses, radiographers, and others. And the nursing issue is one that I will spend a bit of time on now, because this, if it is allowed to continue unaddressed, will compromise the delivery of health care at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And that, for me, is something that we will not allow to happen. But what was really interesting for me reading the document I told you about, and I'm willing to make it, I believe that by now this ought to be a document at this house. But I read this paragraph. The commissioning of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital was completed by March 1965.
Before you go on, member, what's the name of the document?
The first 15 years, 1964 to 1979, Queen Elizabeth Hospital, produced by the Ministry of Health, National Insurance, Barbados. The commissioning of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital was completed by March 1965, and the Department of Nursing Service was faced with a very serious staffing problem caused by the mass exodus of nurses to the United States of America at a pace more rapid than the School of Nursing could replace. This resulted in many vacancies in the nursing establishment, and we are talking about 1964. And the matron of the hospital made some serious recommendations in order to deal with those problems. And those recommendations are the very things that we are seeking to do today. And the first thing on the agenda and the priority back then was to import nurses who were registrable in Barbados in order to fill the gap. And that is exactly what this government is doing by sending a delegation to Ghana. But it is a short-term measure. We are going beyond that. And the fact that there's a global nursing shortage does not scare the Minister of Health and Wellness, and it shouldn't scare those persons who work within the health sector either. We cannot stop people from going abroad to seek a better life. And my view of dealing with this is that we can make an industry, a service industry out of it by providing and producing nurses in abundance to serve international jurisdictions and to serve our own country. We have a history of doing so. And that process has started, first of all, right here in Barbados, because we've met with all the stakeholders to determine exactly what the issues are in relation to the failure rate of Barbadian nurses doing the regional examinations, and we have taken corrective measures to deal with that in collaboration with the Ministry of Education and in collaboration with the Barbados Community College. And we've gone further than that. We have held meetings with some of the offshore medical universities here in Barbados, along with the University of the West Indies, to see how best we could advance the cause of nursing by getting training in specialized areas so that we can improve not only the nursing stock quantitatively, but qualitatively as well. And that is looking very, very promising. We also, when we visited Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago to attend PAHO meetings, we met with officials of PAHO to see how they can assist us in this regard. And I'm happy to report that they are more than anxious to help Barbados, and that they are in contact with two universities, University of Miami and the University, I believe, of Michigan. I think it is Michigan. And those are universities that PAHO and the World Health Organization collaborate with, and they've used those two to assist Guyana in terms of providing not only training for nurses, but doing something that is fundamentally important in this country, which is to provide training to improve the staff at the Barbados Community College so that they can deliver a better program for Barbadian nurses. So we are not leaving any stone at all untouched in this regard. We have gone the full distance with this, to the extent that we have now been able to secure a fourth chance for Barbadian nurses to pass the regional exam. And the difficulty, the real challenge that exists at the time, which is the fact that the regional exam is set by the regional nursing body, administered by the Caribbean Examination Council. Barbados Community College teaches their program, which our students graduate and do well, but the two programs are not in sync, and we are fixing that. We've also agreed, and it has started, for remedial training to be done at the Barbados Community College to assist those nurses who have been experiencing difficulty with the regional exam. And I'm insisting on another step, and I believe it has happened before, but it seems to have been discontinued. I don't mind if there are some people who feel that the pass rate is not good because we are not attracting the right level of students. But I view it differently, Mr. Deputy Speaker. If those are the ones that we are attracting, we have to work with that.
Right.
And the best way to work with that is to have a program before they start community college that will bring them up to the standard and the level that they can start the program with confidence.
Train it. Train it.
So those are some of the things that we've been doing. The Minister of Health and Wellness inherited some significant problems in the health care system. QEH, no exception. We had problems where there have been questionable decisions in terms of how funds have been spent, and I'm not casting aspersions on anyone, but that's a fact. In terms of budgeting, there are problems in terms of stocking out of vital supplies, and we are addressing those issues by providing training, one. Number two, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Board has engaged the services of a private company to be able to get in there to bring things up to the level where they should be, and that, along with the training, will allow us to be able to improve significantly in that regard. But my view, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what has gone before me, I can't do anything much with except to learn from the errors.
Good point.
And there were a lot. And those things that have been done well in the past, to build on those. But as Lyndon B. Johnson once said, yesterday is not ours to recover, but tomorrow is ours to win or lose.
Good point.
The Minister of Health and Wellness, with the support of his team, we are fighting to win tomorrow. And so, I come now to the governance structure and what it is that we are trying to do. I said to you before that the board is made up of a number of really talented and skilled, trained, qualified individuals in their various areas of specialty. And they've been working extremely hard, I'm telling you that, really hard, and working well. Those managers who are still at the QH have been put under significant pressure because of the exodus of some of their colleagues, and they have been trying their very, very best. But there's some things that are required now to bring the board and management together to be able to engage the entire hospital body for the benefit of the people in this country, the persons who use the services at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And I want to say right here now that the choice that I made and the recommendation that I made to Cabinet and Cabinet accepted for the person to lead this team, this board, in my view, and for those persons who would have been present or who would have been listening to the debate, the estimates debate when the Ministry of Health was in the well, would agree with me, I'm sure, that the chair of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital Board batted with confidence. Batted like Brian Lauren, Gary Sorers, and Vivian Richards combined. A stellar performance. And I know that there were some people who were probably thinking some things that were not really the best in terms of selection, because once you see certain names, you tend to look around, and because you see the last name and a name similar in this chamber. But I want to say this. Let me tell you why this Minister of Health made the recommendation, not based on any affiliations of any kind. It was based on the quality of the person that I saw. We have a chair of the board that is a qualified attorney at law. A person with a Master's of Science with distinction in health planning, health policy, health finance from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, along with the London School of Economics. A person with over 20 years experience in direct program management in health systems and health services. A person who spent 5 years in the Ministry of Health and Wellness as a health planner. A person who worked as a bed controller at a hospital in the Bronx in New York, working as part of a multidisciplinary clinical team. A person who was executive director of the Barbados Family Planning Association. A person whose current job is that of Chief of Party, working for RTI International Development Group of North Carolina, and that is one of the implementation partners for US aid. And the chair works in the area of local solutions, finding local capacity for local solutions in countries like Barbados, Grenada, Trinidad and Tobago, St. Kitts, Nevis, St. Lucia. So this is a high quality person that the Minister of Health and Wellness is well pleased that he made the recommendation to the Cabinet of Barbados. But in order to strengthen management at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, we have to act quickly. And I want to say why we have to act quickly. Because there are some systemic failures at the hospital. Within the last 2 or 3 months, we've had some overwhelming situations with staff. There are some anxieties among patients and so on, accident and emergency, and we have to move swiftly but confidently to be able to fix those issues. And so the decision has been taken to create the post of executive chairman. And this is nothing new, not only here in Barbados. It was done with the Barbados Water Authority, although it was against the law and there was no attempt to amend the act back then. But we're doing it the right way. It happens internationally. In fact, the person who heads ATLM, Ross University and all of the associate bodies, performs a similar role within that big, large international entity. If we had gone another route, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it would have taken time, first of all, to recruit a person, then for the person to understand the workings and the runnings of the hospital and the issues. We are at a juncture where we do not have the luxury of time, and the people of Barbados expect us to act. And as minister with this responsibility, I am here to act and hope that this Parliament will act. So that Executive Chair, who will deal primarily with legal matters, strategy and partnerships, policy implementation, communications, general security, philanthropy, and others. But those are the major areas. And what this will allow, especially with policy, because the board has established a number of policy initiatives to improve things at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, but the board needs now to be fully integrated and get management on board, called management. Those are the persons that will execute the policy as established by the board. And I say the board because the board has autonomy. This board operates independently of the Minister of Health and Wellness, as it should be, as was suggested back in 1979 when this document was produced, the need for autonomy. And you know that they were talking about a board back in the 1960s, Mr. Deputy Speaker, but it took the Barbados Labour Party and the administration of the Barbados Labour Party, headed by a Minister of Health who had the vision and the intestinal fortitude to do what was recommended decades ago, which was the right thing to have done. And it is now my responsibility to build on that and take it to another level by giving the board further autonomy, and that the executive chair will report not to the Ministry of Health but directly to the Minister of Health, so that we cut out some of the bureaucracy so that they can get on with the running of the hospital. We decided to create a position called Chief Operations Officer, and the holder of that post will be responsible, first of all, to the executive chair for the overall management of the hospital. In other words, the other executive directors report to the Chief Operations Officer and then on to the chair. But other specific areas of responsibility will include accreditation, health planning, risk management, IT and cyber security, and related issues. And then we come to the third post, which is absolutely vital in my opinion at the QEH. Back in the 60s, there was a clinical, I don't remember the term, if it was director, but there was no medical, not director of medical services, but there was a person responsible for the clinical side of things. And then this director of medical services position was created. But that is, as it stands, that is a fairly massive undertaking. It's a lot of work. That's the heart and core of the hospital in terms of the delivery of health services. And we want to improve significantly in that area because the people of Barbados are calling for improvements in that area. And so we've decided to split the responsibilities, or share the responsibilities between the medical, director of medical services, that post remains, and the creation of this new post, clinical and diagnostic services. And the holder of that post will be responsible for all labs, the pharmacy, radiology, infection control, outpatients, orderlies, case management, social work, and rehabilitation services. The other part of the portfolio will remain with the Director of Medical Services. But that is only the legal aspect of it, because you really cannot legislate leadership. But it's something that we all have to work hard on. And although I said before that the board will have the independence that they deserve to be able to make decisions and to execute the policies of the Minister of Health and Wellness and the government of Barbados, they will do that, but there has to be something called accountability, and this is something that must run through the corridors of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. People must be held accountable at all levels and in all areas. And it starts with me, the Minister of Health and Wellness, because I am accountable to the Prime Minister and her cabinet for the delivery of health services in this country. And most importantly, I am accountable to the people of Barbados who pay taxes for the delivery of high-quality health services. And I take my responsibilities very, very seriously. So I will be holding the executive chair and the board responsible for the execution of policy and for turning around the hospital and making it a center of excellence, a hospital of excellence in this country. And the good news, Mr. Deputy Speaker and the members of this chamber and those who are listening, is that I have the fullest confidence in the persons who sit on the board of Queen Elizabeth Hospital and the management team that will be put together going forward for us to be able to win the future, as stated by Lyndon B. Johnson. And it has to do with leadership. One of the most acclaimed dramatists of all time, I believe Euripides, made a statement once that 10 soldiers wisely led will defeat 100 without a head. And that's a loaded statement, something that we should all learn from. And I know that we are assembling the right team, the right positions to deal with the issues at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And so, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am really delighted that we are making the decisions that we are making, and there will be others. There are some hard decisions that have to be made, but that is what we have been elected to do. That is what we are expected to do. That is the demand of the people, and we must answer to the people. And those decisions will be made. There's some procedures that have been in existence at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital from inception. There are a number of things that satisfy things back then, in that day, in that age, but they do not satisfy things during this time. And I believe that those are things that we have to have those discussions. One of the things that I find difficult to accept is when I start to speak about a number of things, people say to me, man, that has been so for years. And I don't like to hear that statement. You know why? Because that's a defeatist attitude when you make a statement like that. And my DNA, and I'm proud of my military training, will never allow me to adopt a defeatist attitude. And I expect those who I have the pleasure of leading to follow suit.
Right.
We must give it everything 100% and try hard. And just if we are not able to achieve everything, then we must give all to be able to achieve what we can achieve. And it's a continuum. So my intention is for us to be able to bring the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and the health sector, public health sector, up to a level that is far better than the one I would have inherited. And then whoever comes afterwards would have a platform, a wicket to bat on and to take it to another level. We can only get there if we all work together, those persons who are responsible for delivering health care in this country. Because there's a saying that suggests to us that the battle is won or the battle is lost by the spirit of the team. And I'm calling on all persons. I want those persons who were in the QH to understand what was said by the CMO at the time, Lenore Harney, about the people and about the patient, because if we have those things at the forefront of our minds, we will do the right things. I want to say to those persons in the hospital who may not be giving of their very best at this time, I want to say that when you fail to do your job, you are affecting not only the public, you're affecting yourself and your family. You know why? Because the persons who go to the QEH, they don't come from Mars or Venus. They're human beings like us, and they're Barbadians and Caribbean people, and they deserve better. And sometimes it is the relatives of the persons who work in the hospital, and one day, Lord forbid, it will be the very persons themselves who will find themselves in the QEH and who would expect a high quality of care. Similarly, those members of the public who sometimes like to abuse the staff at the hospital, one day, your family will end up there, or you yourself will end up in the hospital. It may not be the very best, but it has done us well. And it is the only one of its kind in Barbados. And even when you go to the private hospitals and so on, very often you end up at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Let us work together to bring the level of service at the QEH to a level that is comparable with international standards, that is acceptable to the people of Barbados, and one that we can all be proud of. And I urge the staff at the QEH, management board and staff, to embrace those Barbadians, and this is something people have spoken to me about. We have Barbadians living abroad who've done well in the medical field, in all spheres of endeavor.
Yes.
and occupying some very senior positions. And in the same way that we are willing to accept monetary donations from our diaspora and equipment, we must embrace those persons who come to offer suggestions to us as to how we can do better. We must embrace them. Not everything they say to us may be applicable here in Barbados given our resources and so on, but we must listen to them and try to embrace the things that they're saying. And finally, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I urge the board, and I will give full support in this regard, I strongly believe that once we start to bat again, that the management staff of the hospital, one by one, should be given the opportunity to go abroad and spend 2 or 3 weeks in an international facility to see how they operate and to see what they can bring back in their areas of responsibility here at the QA to benefit the people of this country. If we do all of these things, if we make these changes, I'm sure that Barbados will deliver the very, very best level of health care, not only in this region, but in any part of the world where there are countries with similar situations like Barbados. And with those few words, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am obliged.
Move the resolution. You have to move the bill.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Member for St. Michael West.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, thank you for your aye.
Can you speak into the mic so we can hear you?
Thank you for your aye. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I think that this bill, in terms of the proposed amendment, it's a very important one. And I would like to speak as briefly as I'm able so to do, pertinently to the contents of it and not stray too far. Let me begin where the Honourable Member for the City, the Honourable Minister of Health, began, and pay courtesies and compliments to him for the way he seeks in his capacity both as leader of the House when so doing and as the substantive Minister for Health and Wellness in the country, the way he seeks to relate to us on this side. I think he tries his best with some constraints to keep us as apprised of what's going on around matters that will come before the House, and even with reference to developments and issues under the purview of the Ministry of Health, and we on this side really appreciate that. And let me say that at the outset. Let me also assert quite clearly and early that anything I shall say is intended only as genuine and constructive observation with reference to one or two important issues. So far as the Queen Elizabeth Hospital is concerned, we have thrown money at that situation across the years. Both administrations, the institution, despite the positives which are popularly known to us today and those prior to us, there have been problems which have plagued the institution. And perhaps the first response has always been that we throw money at the apparent problems at the institution. In the Prime Minister's Minister of Finance's presentation of budgetary proposals of last year, and reinforcing the
estimates debate of last year, we saw another attempt to capitalize the operations of the QEH by introduction of a health levy or health contribution, whatever we dare to call it. I think it's 2.5%, paid by both employer and employee. I would want to ask, perhaps, if the minister would take the time, if he would, and he has the information fairly readily available, as to ascertain of him what has been the outcome, eventually, of that measure in terms of government's attempt to help to capitalize the hospital through that mechanism of the health contribution, as opposed to a direct transfer from the consolidated fund to the operations of the hospital. Perhaps it would be good if we could be told how that has performed thus far. Now, through you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Honourable Minister must surely be aware of the persistent or persisting reports of shortages of basic items at the hospital. So you have the reality of these persistent reports. Stories which are more than anecdotal, or references which are more than anecdotal, to the undesirable experiences that some have had when seeking treatment at the QEH, having to be hospitalized for brief periods or extended periods. And so the perception has been created in Barbados fairly widely that the matter of shortages of basic items for medical care at the hospital has persisted. We have to face this squarely. We have to face this squarely. I don't know that anybody is saying that that's government's fault. People are simply saying that's the reality. How are we going to deal with it, if indeed it is the reality? Now, that kind of perception, view, opinion, experience seems not now today only to relate to the hospital as an institution. You are hearing stories of the unavailability of basic needs items in the schools of Barbados. You're hearing of situations where school children are being asked to bring to school their own toilet paper. Now, the extent to which that is true speaks volumes as to where we are in Barbados in 2019, where government is so cash-strapped, where revenues are so limited in terms of the availability, that the purse is not big enough to meet the needs across the spectrum of the institutions in Barbados. And when we say meet the needs, we are talking in this instance, there I remind us, of basic needs. Now, these are realities that meet us squarely in the face. We can stand to our feet and pronounce in lofty terms as to the headway we're making in Barbados, and we may do that with a measure of truth. But the full truth is that there are areas in Barbados that are reflecting serious decline and deterioration in the institutional structure and the capacity of that structure to serve the constituents of Barbados, even at the level of most basic needs. Now, reports also persist, and I would urge the Honourable Minister, if he would, in his wrap-up perhaps, if he can, to speak to this matter as to the unavailability of critical pieces of equipment in the QEH. Now, the question is it a capital problem, a lack of capital? Is it a management problem, poor management, and perhaps this is why there's an attempt to make some adjustments and corrections and to change course? Or is it a supply issue, which is beyond the capacity of the government itself to address, because perhaps those supply issues relate to problems overseas? So is it a capital problem? Is it a management problem? Is it a supply problem? And is it true that we're still facing a situation where there's a tremendous shortage of unavailability of critical equipment at the hospital? I have some notes here, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to which I will refer. And of course, the Honourable Minister, my friend on the other side, would have the opportunity to set the record straight. These are just personal notes.
Personal notes.
Mr. Deputy Speaker. But I'm made to understand we have problems with the incinerator at the QEH. And that the incinerator is past the end of its useful life, and it has become a national health and safety risk. Now, I really do raise this because I want my honourable friend to be able to reply to these things and set the record straight for the Barbadian public. This poses environmental challenges as the current machinery is subject to constant breakdowns. An acquisition or replacement will come at an approximate cost of $10 million. My advice also is that there's a shortage of surgical instruments for performance of surgeries, operating theaters. The quantity currently in circulation is inadequate, and we're talking about surgeries, Mr. Deputy Speaker. A replacement costs will take us to the vicinity of $1 million. The lens of the neurosurgical microscope is etched, if that's the word. For these procedures, it is risky performing surgeries with the equipment in such a current state. A replacement cost will carry us to $700,000. So we can well see that an equipment problem could also be a capital problem, but it could also be a management problem. But we need to have the record set straight as to whether or not this information, which I seek simply to share, is correct or other than correct. In the radiotherapy treatment planning system, the Department of Oncology, we deal with cancer situations, Mr. Speaker. There's only one planning system. Not having this system available affects all cancer treatments, since the therapeutic radiologists will not be able to plan the course of action necessary for proper treatment. Mr. Deputy Speaker, that's $500,000 that we're talking about. I'm sorry to take so long. I want to apprise you of the situation. And if my honourable friend has not been exposed to this information, or if I am being incorrectly informed as to these matters, then I would want to be corrected on the issues. The temperature of the main operating theaters supposed to be at a certain level. The information seems to suggest that there's a frequent tendency to malfunction, and that the temperature is sometimes not what it ought to be, and therefore surgeries cannot be performed. Diagnostic imaging, echo machines, cardiology-related matters, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Both machines are at the end of life. One machine is out of service regularly, and there are no available parts for support. 2 machines, $750,000. ENT microscope for ENT-related surgery. This microscope lens is also etched with fungus, making it difficult to review images properly. The machine is also at its end-of-life stage. $250,000 to replace one such machine. I saw in the hospital recently what seemed to be a new elevator. So maybe this piece of information I next referred to is not current, I am not sure. But elevator replacement, patient, staff, and visitor transport to additional floor levels. The elevators are problematic. Technology is old. Frequent breakdowns are being experienced. It's a safety issue insofar as the hospital is concerned. $770,000 to address 4 units, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Incubators. We're talking now about infant care. In the intensive care unit for infants, end-of-life infection control risks, premature babies are at risk, insufficient available to meet the current needs, and you need to have 12 at almost $1 million. This is risks to babies. Ventilators, life support apparatus for the medical intensive care unit. These ventilators are end of life as well. The manufacturer has given notice of an inability to support this equipment any further, so it's obsolete. $1,170,000 to get a score of ventilators. Dialysis machines, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The number of run hours of these machines has been exceeded, and they therefore need to be replaced. It's according to the information that I have. $500,000 to get adequate replacements in terms of kidney dialysis machines. Cardiac monitors for monitoring of patients for clinical ward assessment, particularly patients who are at high risk, and the QEH is now short of these monitors. There are $1 million to address the situation. Really want to take the time to go through all this, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps I'll make this the last one. CTG monitors for fetal monitoring in the labor wards. A basic requirement to monitor the fetal condition of unborn infants. QEH is short of these machines as well. So if in fact these shortages still persist, we really need to get a hold on this, get a grip on this situation, determine if there is a management dynamic contributing to the cause of the situation which now obtains, whether or not it is a supply issue, whether or not it is the unavailability of capital despite the subvention from government in addition to the health contribution of 2.5%. Now, we are now, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, according to the Honourable Minister, seeking to address management-related issues. Now, I want to be very careful with my next few remarks. Let me say this up front. I think it's very unfortunate that we've come to a place in Barbados where every single action by politicians, every single action by governments, whatever stripes they wear, must be scrutinized. I'm not stopping there. Must be scrutinized and then characterized based on either partisan scrutiny or inadequate scrutiny or misinformation, but must be scrutinized and then characterized or classified as being improper, especially when the actions and decisions of politicians, the action and decision of the government entity of the day involves those who are close to politicians, close to party, close to governments. I think it's unfortunate. That is where we are today. But because that is where we are today, I believe sometimes extra care, a little bit of caution, a little bit of forward movement, even though there be urgency, is necessary about what we do. Now, the minister brings a bill here to us today. The bill purports to suggest that there will be changes in the board structure, in the management structure of the QEH, that executive chairman will be employed and engaged, a chief operations officer, etc., and some other pertinent changes. Now, the minister has not identified anybody who has been already selected, recommended, approved as the CEO, or the executive chair, I should say. But he has said sufficient to indicate to us that the person chosen is close to government. And that is bound to raise some questions in the Barbados of today, and that is unfortunate. And I might very well be wrong in my opinion as to who that individual is. But just in case I am right in terms of the identity of that individual chosen to be executive chairman, I would wish to state that I have every confidence in that person. I would wish to state that I have always considered that person to be one of integrity, one who is possessed of a high degree of intelligence and an interest in the national well-being of this country of ours, and equipped to operate in this capacity and at that level. And I honestly do feel like that. But in the unfortunate context of these very turbulent partisan times, these very politicized days and weeks and months and years in which we live, questions will be asked and the government will have to be able to respond, and to respond with clarity. Questions were asked around the recruitment and appointment of the last chief executive officer. Questions were raised then. Insinuations and statements with some degree of certainty and authority were made in public as to the circumstances of his recruitment at the time. Questions were raised with respect to the level of remuneration attaching to his contractual arrangements at the time. Because that's the Barbados in which we live, and people have a right to know. That gentleman of whom we now speak came to the well of this house and participated in a part of the estimates discussion in helping to provide answers and clear statements on policy on behalf of the QEH and by extension the Ministry of Health. He was subjected, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to simply one or two questions which seem to appear to be a little close in terms of the scrutiny in relation to himself. And that gentleman fled these precincts, never to have been seen again. And I have not been privy to any statement as to what befell him. Why did he so fast flee these precincts? And why did he so forsake his post for the rest of the time that the Ministry of Health and its officials, led by the chairman of the board, very well led by the chairman of the board, why did he so fast forsake his post and demit office? And we did not hear. And I'm simply saying, if questions were raised then, brace yourself. Questions will be raised now. Have the answers to justify your action. What is the level of remuneration to attach to the post of the executive chair? That is going to be pertinent in the Barbados of today. You cannot escape that. One thing I didn't like that was said by the Honourable Minister in his presentation, and it had to do with the reporting relationship from the executive chairman of the board. I think the minister indicated that reports from the executive chair will be given directly to the minister, bypassing the board and the ministry. I think I heard that. And if that is the case, I would want to suggest that that perhaps could be an ill-advised approach. It does not matter that urgency attaches. Haste sometimes.
On a point of order.
Mr. Deputy Chair,
He's misleading the House.
the honourable member is misleading the House in the sense that I did not indicate that the executive chair, as the head of the management team of the QEH, would report directly to the minister, because the board reports to the minister and not the management team.
Right.
But in the capacity of head of the board, because all decisions from the management team at the QEH must go to the board.
Right.
And then, as happens now,
Right.
then the chair of the board reports to the minister.
Who reports to the cabinet? I remember.
All right, I understand a little bit more clearly now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and that is that the executive chairman of the board, in her capacity as executive chair, will be reporting on behalf of the board to the minister. But I thought I did hear as well the minister say that report will bypass the ministry and come straight to the Minister of Health because of the urgency.
Reports to the cabinet.
But be that as it may, I have every confidence in the honourable member that he will get it right, whatever the position is. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the other manpower-related issues, not just at the level of CE or as executive chair or COO, Other manpower issues to be addressed, the honourable member touched on it. There's still a matter of shortage of nurses and the flight of nurses. And we could supplement the numbers by going wherever they are to be found. Once they're qualified and willing to come and we're able to pay and bring them here, I suppose that is all right. But I don't think that we should settle for that. We can also take the view that it is good if nurses leave Barbados, that they can find a place in the job market of this world, because Barbados has a history of exporting services and skills and labor to the world, and we understand that has helped to build us historically and will in the future. But I think we still need to explore as to why specifically in more detail there is this shortage and there continues to be this flight. Is it the pay? Is it the conditions? Is it the recruitment process? I think a proper examination must be made with reference to that to see where the problem is. I think we have also still with us the problem of overworked junior doctors. I think that's a very big bone of contention at the institution, where junior doctors feel that they are disadvantaged, hard pressed, long working hours, repeated shifts, not the best of conditions, in the context of an unavailability from time to time of supplies and equipment to do their job. So I really would want to know that there's a serious effort to address the plight of junior doctors in the QEH. Understand also some extent that private practice beyond and away from their official function at the hospital is either restricted or prohibited. And I would have to be guided by the minister on that issue. But we do have a problem beyond the chief, the executive chair and the chief operations officer and other higher positions. We have problems with medical staff as well, and junior doctors. Do we still have a problem with, and this is part of the perception of the reality in Barbados here, do we still have a problem with overindulgent consultants? Do you know, I once had a gentleman with whom I attended school come to visit me in the ministry, and he had a problem, a medical problem. I was attending a doctor who operated as a consultant in the QEH but had private practice, and he was told that he needed to have a surgical procedure done, and if he went on a hospital schedule, it would take quite some time, but it can be done under private management. He himself could do it, and it would be done with some dispatch, and it would be done in the hospital facility. Now, stories like that persist, and the minister can correct me if I'm wrong, and that doesn't happen anymore. But there's a view out there that there are overindulgent consultants who put stress on junior doctors, but who themselves engage in such privileges as would better themselves financially and materially, sometimes without sufficient regard to patient care in pursuit of that interest of financial advancement. You tell me that's true. When my friend came to me, he came to see whether or not there was some aid available to him in the state-operated medical aid facility. And I told him what the position was, and he went back to his doctor and related the story to him as to what I said with reference to the alleged overindulgence of consultants in Barbados. You know what the response was, Mr. Deputy Speaker? Tell Reverend Atherley his day will come. Now that was a callous, threatening tone of the response that I got. I mentioned that in here years ago, before you fellas came. You remember it? Yeah, you used to sit beside me and counsel me. The Honourable Member for Christchurch West. I have been the beneficiary of much counsel from him. You guys don't know. Yeah, and that happened. And Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would hate to think, really, honestly, Mr. Minister, that still persists. And it still persists. Somebody needs to be powerful enough and bold enough to do something about that. You can't just do something about the plastics. You have to do something about the professionals who think that they have some right to super overindulgence in Barbados.
Still happen.
Yeah? Somebody has to stand up and pull those fellas in line. I'm sure I'll find support for that from the Honourable Member St. Thomas. She's always on the right side of issues. I thank you very much. They think to make this self. Ain't her words. Now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, through you to the Honourable Member, listen, much is being said today about the apparent increase in hospital infections in Barbados. Much is being said today about the apparent increase in infections contracted in the hospital in Barbados today. Do we have a problem at our premier health institution that you go there for health care and whatever it is, whether it's the environment or the operational practices, whatever it is, do we have a situation where there is in fact a serious increase in the incidence of hospital infections in Barbados? If so, what is the suggested cause or suspected cause or known cause? Very seriously, and not mischievously or otherwise, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I also put to the Minister this one. Has there been any notice of an increase in leptospirosis in Barbados over the past year? The rodent population is obviously increasing. They're not only increasing in number, they're increasing in size, and they are increasing in virulence. I was being brought up to speed by someone in the constituency the other day, and this is the way they put it to me, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The cats are now afraid of the rats. Thank God, he said, for 2 dogs in the gap that kill the rats. And every morning you come out, you find a rat or 2 in the street because the 2 dogs have taken care of some rat overnight. But the cats are now afraid of the rats. Mr. Deputy Speaker, this is a serious thing.
Yeah.
This is a very serious thing. Do we see any evidence of an increase in the incidence of leptospirosis in Barbados? I am not saying that to suggest that there is. I'm saying that to say through you to the Honourable Minister that if there is, let us know, and let us know how we can treat to it. Now, I am sure the Honourable Minister is doing his best, but he can only do the best with the tools he's been given. We've already had one member saying on that side, I have been given a task to do with respect to the garbage, but I have no tools. I have not been given the tools to do it. And if it is that the Minister, Honourable Minister of Health, has been given a task to do, but does not have the tools to do it, please say so, and let the voices from the opposition benches help to sound that note so that ears may hear and respond to your cry. Mr. Speaker, I made an appeal, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I made an appeal for help for the physiotherapy department at the hospital over a year ago, and I repeat that. I haven't had occasion to be there recently, but I used to go there with some frequency in an effort to help out first my sister and then a member of the church. And you could see an obvious and evident dedication of the staff in the department, but you can also see the inadequacy of the space, and you could see the shortage of the equipment. And persons there spoke into my ears with reference to those matters, persons on staff, and asked me, please, to sound the note that it needs to be an improvement. I made that mention here, and I think the Honourable Prime Minister acknowledged it and replied and did indicate at the time when you were proposing to improve the situation in the emergency department that it was true that the physiotherapy department needed some help as well. So I ask again for that. Now, you know, Mr. Speaker, Deputy Speaker, I can't sit down without reference to a man called Burt. Now, the honourable member from St. Michael East has said to the people, sorry, the honourable member of St. James North has said to the people of Barbados that he has problems with the postal service because of a fellow called Burt. Over 100 postal workers were sent home. I didn't even know that until I heard him say that. And I suspect, therefore, Barbados didn't know that till the honourable member from St. James North, in his attempt to have honest communication with the people of Barbados, said, we've lost over 100 postal workers, so you have issues there. I heard the honourable member for St. Michael East suggest we have a problem with trucks, but when we do in fact get those trucks, we may have a problem with manpower because of a man called Burt. Now, during the course of the estimates debate, we were of the view on this side that there may have been some layoffs at the QEH at various levels. We were made to feel assured that if there were layoffs, the number would be minimal. I really would like kindly, through you, sir, to ask for an update as to what those numbers are, because we do not want to know that what happened at the Postal Service, what happened at the Sanitation Department, also happened at the QEH. And therefore, that is the context in which I ask that particular question. May I close on a positive note, Mr. Deputy Speaker? I started with a commendation and may end with one. I think the introduction of extended hours of service, to which you referred at the polyclinic, is to be applauded. May not have achieved 100% of what you set out to do, but you worked to have some progress done, and the reports you've given us today suggest that the level of success has been significant and pleasing. And I therefore, in that context and with regard to that specific matter, offer you my compliments and my commendation, Mr. Speaker. I thank you.
Thank you, you're obliged. Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. First, let me start by saying I fully support this measure to establish the posts of an executive chairman and also a chief operations officer and executive director of clinical and diagnostic services to provide for the related matters for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. First, Mr. Deputy Speaker, let me say that that kind of position to effectively run a 600-bed hospital is a tremendously difficult undertaking. Tremendously difficult undertaking. And I can say that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because I've had some experience as an executive chairman for a small hospital, 30 beds. And I can tell you that there is always a problem in a hospital. There is never a day that there is not an issue in a hospital. And I'll give you an example. No matter what equipment you have, you can always get better equipment. Because every time you may buy a piece of equipment, the next 6 months, the next year, a better piece of equipment comes out. One that can do a little bit more. One that can be a little more impressive in terms of its speed of delivery of the diagnosis. One that has better or more bells and whistles. So there is always a better piece of equipment. Be it cardiac equipment, be it anesthetic equipment, be it operating room equipment, there is always a better piece of equipment. And a hospital, any hospital worth its salt, will always have a list of equipment that the hospital wants and that the department wants. But it is what the ability or the availability of the funds can carry. But it is not good equipment that provides good treatment. It is a clinician that cares about the patient. It is a clinician that has the well-being of the patient at heart. And I'm proud to say that at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, the clinicians have the well-being of the patients at heart. I was never privileged enough to work at our esteemed Queen Elizabeth Hospital. But I've worked at many other hospitals in the UK, Doncaster Royal Infirmary, the Royal Gwent Hospital, the Heath Hospital, Abergavenny, Morriston, Chepstow. Because in that system, you're encouraged to move from hospital to hospital, to be able to understand and experience the training under various consultants and various departments and so on. The only downside of having only one hospital is that junior doctors do not get that experience of moving around from various departments or various hospitals. But nevertheless, we must remember that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital is a training hospital. And when I discuss concepts and patients with the junior doctors that I get to come into contact with, I must say they're extremely well trained, extremely well informed, and able and capable to do the jobs and the tasks in which they are called to do. In fact, when some of our junior doctors leave here and travel abroad to other universities, they're quickly grappled up by Yale and Harvard and Johns Hopkins and hospitals like that, because they recognize the good training and the expertise and the clinical situations that they're exposed to at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. So we can be proud of our junior doctors, just as much as we can be proud of our nurses. And we can be proud of every single person that comes to work and does the job to the best of his ability at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Because at the end of the day, and I have to agree with the Leader Opposition, and I have to agree with the member for the City of Bridgetown, the most important person in the hospital is the patient. It's the patient. And the Leader Opposition spoke about something which he called it infections that you get in hospital. We call it nosocomial infections. Nosocomial infections. And nosocomial infections can be found in big hospitals, in small hospitals, in hospitals of excellent repute, and in hospitals that have difficulties. But it's something that you have to constantly work at to make sure that you keep things under control, that you have a good cross-infection program, that you have good sterilization programs, that people retain their training and understand how they must wash their hands, keep themselves in a certain environment so as not to pass infections from one to the other and so on. But it is a problem that lots of hospitals all over the world deal with, and we recognize it, and that is why in modern times, what we have found is that treatment in hospital has moved away from people spending long periods of time in hospital. So what you would find now is that treatments are geared to get your treatment, get your surgery, and get out of hospital. And that is how modern modalities of treatment within a hospital have moved and changed. and you would find that we now operate, I'll give you an instance. There was a time to fix a procedure in your stomach, a gallbladder for instance. You had to have open your stomach and get it treated. Now it's done by camera, laparoscopically. What does that mean? That means that your recovery time is much faster. That means that you can get in and out of hospital much quicker. That means that you can be treated as an outpatient rather than spending long periods of time in hospital. And the culture of hospital and the culture of treatment has changed over the years. But it means that there's always a need for equipment. And no matter what you do in terms of managing a hospital, there's so many things. There's human resource problems that you have to deal with. There's disposal of garbage and infectious waste you have to deal with. There's note management you have to deal with. There's drug procurement you have to deal with. And it goes on and on and on. And you know, this is why, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that it was changed way back then from being a department of the ministry to a board. And this new concept of having an executive chairman is a further evolution of making the hospital nimble, able, and capable to be able to respond to problems quickly and efficiently. Because at the end of the day, that is what it's about. You cannot at every turn wait for a board to have a meeting to be able to buy or change a piece of equipment. Sometimes you have to have, the executive chairman has to have that power and that capability to be able to make decisions on the spot. Because at the end of the day, it's people's lives that you're dealing with. And you know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in the medical profession, we have a saying that you cannot have the right treatment and the wrong diagnosis. You cannot have the right treatment and the wrong diagnosis. In order to get the right treatment, you have to have the right diagnosis. And I think this is the right treatment for what is happening at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. You know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we saw an exodus of senior management at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. And I know why they had that exodus. They had that exodus, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because they had some questionable practices at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. In a previous debate, many years ago, I would have made it clear to the public that the Queen Elizabeth Hospital was paying double for a box of gloves that you could get outside for half the price. A box of simple, non-sterile gloves. At that time, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital was paying $14 for a box of gloves, and outside you could get the same box of gloves for $7. And I made it clear. And the then chairman, and the then CEO, and other members of the board went to the press and said, misleading people, and I telling lies and all sort of thing. But I brought the box of gloves and showed them. And I showed them the invoice. And there was no answer to it. So when people then come in the well, and I ask them what relation they are to a particular company, I know why they didn't come back to work there after that. But I want people, and I want the management of the hospital to understand one important thing. In this country, there's no statute of limitations on criminal activity. You hear what I say, Mr. Deputy Speaker? In this country, there is no statute of limitations on criminal activity. And there are extradition treaties with many countries in Barbados and other countries. So if people have been involved in criminal activity, I'm not saying that they have been, but if people have been involved in criminal activity, and they move to a country that has extradition, be aware that there's extradition treaties available to the people of Barbados. Because if, and I'm not saying that they took $5 million to buy stuff and the stuff ain't arrived yet, but the $5 million get paid, I'm not saying that. But there's a question about a $5 million transaction that went on. And we need to get to the bottom of these things. Yeah. People need to be held accountable for their actions. And in the same way that the former CEO or whoever it is must be held accountable for their actions, I know that whoever becomes the new the new executive chairman will be held accountable by this government as well. So not only are we putting all of those who may have left on notice, we also put all those who come in on notice too. That you got to do the job to the best of your ability for the people of this country. And that's what we want. Now we know that you're gonna have problems. We know you're gonna make mistakes from time to time. But all we want you to do is do the best you can every day. You know, Mr. Deputy Speaker, when I was a neurosurgeon, I used to go to work every day to do the best I can for every single patient.
Yeah.
Every single patient without exception.
You had a good reputation.
You're going to make mistakes? Of course you're going to make mistakes. You're only human. You know, it reminds me of a particular person I did a procedure for. He was a professor at the University of West Indies here. I remember it to this day. It was about 17 years ago. Yeah, give or take a year. And I did a procedure for him. It was a graft to put in bone and so on and this sort of thing. It was a big procedure. It cost him a lot of money. And it failed. 17 years ago. I still remember it today. And when I had to then remove this graft that I put in for him, it lasted for him for a couple of years and then it failed. I looked at him and I said, you know, I am really upset and really disappointed that this graft didn't last more than 2 years. The professor looked at me and said, listen, I was happy for the 2 years I got with the graft, but I can't do it, so you don't be upset, you press on. Because you have the skills to do it and you have provided the service for me. I was happy for the 2 years I got, and I recognize that sometimes everything does not work out the way you want it to work. And I remember that well.
Right.
And it encouraged me even although I was disappointed. And it hurt me because remember 17 years ago and I still remember it today. Now, that does not mean that I have not had other failures. I would have had. But I remember the words that Professor Nurse, I remember the words that Professor Nurse told me. Because even although it was a time that I was sad about, it encouraged me. And it helped me to understand that if you have a skill, if you have a talent, that you must press on and improve on that.
Right.
You know, an expert is somebody who has made more mistakes than anybody else, but learned from them. That's what expert is. Any expert surfer or skateboarder or whoever has broken more bones, any expert jockey has fallen off the horse more times than others. I had an uncle who was a jockey. He falls down more times than others, break every bone in his body and whatnot, but learn from it and gets to improve all the time. And that's what an expert is. By extension, we understand that you're going to make mistakes. We understand that you can fall off the bicycle from time to time, but you get up and you press on. And the hospital is something like that. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make decisions that may not work out for the best, but you learn from it and you move on. Because at the end of the day, it is about providing the best treatment for the patients that we have. And I agree with the member for the city. It's not only the patients that are from Barbados, because we have patients that come from our CARICOM brothers and sisters, and they're entitled to good treatment too. I'll give you an example. Suppose you have a patient from St. Vincent who has an infectious disease. Well, if you don't treat that patient, then you put the rest of the population at risk. So you have to be prepared to treat patients that are from our region. You can't exclude them just because they're not Barbadian. So, you know, when you become a physician, you take something called the Hippocratic Oath. And that Hippocratic Oath says that you will treat everybody, irrespective of youth of age, of good and bad, of rich and poor, young and old, and it goes on that you will pass on that knowledge to those who follow you, and things like that. I took my oath very, very seriously. And I treated people from all walks of life, whether they could pay or not pay. Whether they were, in my estimation, good or bad. Prisoners used to come, anybody, some of the richest, some of the poorest. I treated everybody to the best of my ability. And I believe that once we can get that culture, that inculcation in all of our health professionals, the hospital will be better for it. So I fully support this measure. I know that whoever the minister or the cabinet or the board chooses will do their job to the best of their ability, will try to make the institution a better institution. Yes, you'll have to get better equipment, but you always need better equipment. Yes, you'll have to get better procurement systems, because there's a big problem with procurement in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, and we need to tighten up procurement in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Yes, you'll have human resource management problems. Name a big institution that has 2,000 employees that doesn't have it. All institutions with 1,000, 2,000 employees will have human resource management problems. Yeah. Yes, you will have training issues. Yes, those at the top will have to understand that they have a duty and a responsibility, not only to the, and I'm talking about the consultants, not only to the patients, but also to the junior staff who they are charged to train. And they have to remember that responsibility, because somebody took the time to train them. And they're going to remember that and pass on that knowledge. So a hospital is a difficult place to manage. And I know it is an unenviable task. It is a task that will burden whoever takes that position, all three of those positions. But it is a task that is very fulfilling, to know that you can make a difference to the well-being of a nation. And I wish whoever gets that position the very best. I'm obliged.
I'm obliged to you. Very good speech. Member for Christ First, St. Michael South.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. I want to begin, of course, by supporting what is before the House, and by telling the Minister, the Honourable Member for the City, that he did a most excellent job in his presentation.
Yes. Agreed.
That it was riveting both in style and in substance. And I also, sir, must say that I would have to thank the board at the QEH for the work that they have done over the last year and a half. You know, last night I read a document that was circulated about some of the achievements of the board in the last few months. And all that I could say at the end of it was, this is outstanding, outstanding work. And that perhaps we need to communicate more of this to the public. And in fact, as I speak during the course of my few minutes, I'll be brief. I promise to be brief today. But that we should communicate more as a board. And sir, I must say, sir, though I want to focus on policy because I'm a policy practitioner, I must say, sir, that I listened to the member for the city and the qualifications associated with the person who he has chosen for the position, and that those qualifications, sir, are so outstanding that in my view, if we were to wait 1,000,000 years, we could not find a better person, sir, to lead the institution. And that in fact, sir, beyond the qualifications, because many of us come to jobs with all kind of fancy qualifications, beyond the qualifications, sir, we need a person who understands service at the end of the day, someone who serves, sir. And that while, sir, at the end of the day, we have a commitment as a government, sir, to make sure we put the best persons in place, sir, we have, of course, to recognize that there is a process by which people must be chosen for positions. And that through a fair and open and democratic process, sir, Barbadians tend to throw up the best persons for the job when that process is democratic and fair. And I believe, sir, that we have gone through a fair and democratic process, sir, or that the board has, sir, in making its determination. But beyond the person that leads the institution, sir, because we could have a tendency to personalize a debate, sir, when this is not even about a personality. This is about making the right choices, sir, at a time when the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, sir, needs better direction. It is about, sir, taking health policy seriously at a time when we need to take health policy seriously. And I believe, sir, that should be the crux of our debate. Sir, I heard in the warm-up when the Honourable Leader of the Opposition was speaking, sir, in his warm-up, I suppose, in his run-up to his points, he made the point, sir, that there is lack of, in some institutions, there may be lack of toilet paper, and that there are basic facilities that should be available in some of these institutions that are not available, and then somehow made the association that the government is cash-strapped, and would give the average person the impression that because the government, in his estimation, is cash-strapped, that we are now having institutions without toilet paper and without these basic facilities, sir, because the government is cash-strapped. As if this government, on any given day, would allow any of our institutions, sir, to go without those basic, knowingly, to go without those basic facilities. To give the impression, perhaps, on matters, sir, that are in some cases, sir, administrative, and I do not know that necessarily all that was said is indeed true, but I suspect he has his facts. But I do not believe that any right-thinking government would sit back and idly allow institutions, primary schools, secondary schools, and so on, to go without these basic facilities, sir, because the government is cash-strapped. None of us in here, sir, none of us, not a single one of us in this room, sir, none of us would ever vote on anything above, sir, making sure that people have their basic necessities when they go into a school, sir. And we have to reject that kind of association, sir, because it gives the wrong impression. And it gives the wrong impression deliberately, sir, when we know better that the government would never do it. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. And so I feel that we have to clarify that so that it does not go into the public domain that somehow we have allowed as a government for people to go to work, sir, and children to go into schools and not be able to get the basic necessities. I did not want to disturb him because I figure he was taking a very long run-up, sir, to deliver his point. And so I would allow him to finish his point. But at the end of the day, sir, it cannot go without being addressed. It cannot. Sir, there are other things, sir. I listened to the opposition leader, and there was a whole list of things that are wrong that were listed. And we could list everything that is wrong with every institution in Barbados, every institution that is in the Caribbean, sir. We could list every wrong in every institution in the world. But what he did not do during his presentation, sir, was to speak to the many things that were done to address the wrongs. And I would like to think, sir, I mean, I know him to be a man of great capacity. I do. But that kind of intellectual laziness on matters of such import should not leave this parliament unaddressed, sir. So that we could all list problems. We could do it. But what are the things that we are doing to address it? And funny enough, one of the fundamental things that we are doing to address the problem is the thing that is right before the house. That's why we are here. A lot of the things that we are seeking to address, sir, many of the problems that were listed in the litany of woes that were raised by the opposition leaders, sir, many of them we are already working on. And to make sure that we are in a position to do them, sir, we have decided that we may need to make some adjustments to the structure of the QEH to better deliver goods and services to people. Well, that is what we came to government for, Mr. Speaker, sir. That is why we came in here today. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, my apologies. And that is the reason we are having this conversation, sir. So let us get this debate straight, sir. And it is unfortunate, sir, I listened. He said, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition said it is unfortunate that a person close who is somehow very capable and is capable of delivering, they have intelligence, integrity, equipped to operate and take on such a task, sir. But it is unfortunate in the context of in these turbulent partisan times, sir, questions will be asked. But I have not heard him, though he supports who he thinks the person is, I never heard him, sir, say that he has the answers to the same questions that may be asked. Never once, sir, saying these questions may be asked, sir, but because I think the person is such a capable person, sir, believe that such a person will be the person for a job, except to say, sir, questions may be asked. But I didn't know this person.
What you do, Rice?
Mr. Deputy,
What you raise on the
the honorable member is misleading the host.
point of order?
That hurts. I tried my best to be so charitable. I tried my best to genuinely and honestly put before this House and the listening public of Barbados the view that I have every confidence in the person I believe to be chosen, even though that person was not identified, based on a number of issues. All I said was that it is unfortunate that we live in Barbados in a time where every action of a politician or government is scrutinized and then beyond that characterized as being the expression of nepotism and all that kind of stuff. What else can I do but say I support the choice, though the person was unnamed, and say that it was unfortunate that Bajans would question that? What's wrong with that?
Okay.
These gentlemen, honorable gentlemen in this place, will prompt this man on his feet now standing before you, sir, to take a more virulent approach against them in these debates.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm thankful for the member for clarifying his position, sir. That he totally supports who he thinks the choice is, sir, and that I am very thankful, sir, to hear the honorable member, sir. But, sir, as we press on, sir, during the course...
All right, member, let him speak. All right, honorable member.
course of this debate, sir, I want to talk, sir, more on the nature of the New Deal, sir, in policy and in health policy. Sir, we have to be very mindful in all that we do, sir, about social justice. And I listened to the honorable member for St. Peter this morning when he spoke on the housing debate, sir. His conversation around social justice, sir. And I feel that is one of the things that we have to address on this debate in health. Because, sir, I know that health care must be health care for all. Everybody who goes to the hospital, sir, must have a fair chance, a fair shot of being treated, sir, of being seen, of being taken care of, sir. And the question that has to be asked is, what is the nature of the policy intervention? What are we seeking to do? What are we seeking to achieve? Because, sir, beyond numbers, at the end of the day, beyond GDP and all those other things that we associate, sir, with policy, we, sir, must address many matters pertaining to health, pertaining to poverty, pertaining to housing, sir, and we must take these things very seriously, sir. So what is the ultimate goal? We have to create a society, sir, in which we all feel proud, where we would all want to live, sir, and where we would all want to die. But we have a society, sir, where people who have means still often choose to take themselves, their children, their loved ones out of Barbados, in many cases when the person needs medical assistance. And, sir, people who do not have those means have to go to the QEH. Now, I believe the QEH is good enough for everybody in Barbados. And that people who go to the QEH, sir, should be treated with dignity, sir, and with respect at every single time. And that is going to be very important for us, sir, as we go forward. But, sir, there are systemic social inequalities that we have to address. Some at the QEH, some so rooted into our society, sir, some in housing, some that we have to address, sir. There was a song many years ago, I think it was by Yellow Man, and he said, if life was a thing that money could have buy, the rich would have lived, and the poor would have died. And, sir, I cannot support any policy, sir, any policy intervention, sir, that does not seek at its core, sir, to make sure that those who do not have the most vulnerable in this society. I could not support any policy intervention, sir, that allows the poor to have to go feeling as if they're begging for service, sir. And that when we came to office, sir, we said we were going to restructure these institutions, sir, so as to be able to deliver the best services to people. And so that we are attempting to do so, sir, in a manner, sir, that is above board, and one that allows my constituents, sir, in St. Michael's South, the people that I grew up with, sir, in the Pine, the ones who represent the honourable member, sir, for the city, in the city, all of our constituents, sir, many of whom do not have means, have to feel that this government is going to work to satisfy their interests. And so we cannot have any kind of exclusionary policies at the QEH. It would be antithetical to that which we came to office to do. And, sir, we cannot support it. But I have, sir, a constituent who, before we came to office, sir, broke his hand. And the bone, piece of the bone was broken off, sir. And he was promised an operation that took forever. And then when he finally got the operation, the first operation, he had then to go back for another one. But delay after delay after delay, come back, and I will deal with it, come back. Up to now, sir, has not been satisfied, sir. There's so much more that I could say to this, but I will not say it here. But up to this date, sir, he sent me a picture of his hand just last week. But the thing still in his hand, still can't get an operation, sir. And it has been happening now for a long time at the hospital. And it has nothing, sir, to do with the honourable member for the city. I believe, sir, that the honourable member for the city is trying his best to make corrections to all of these things. I believe that the board is working to address these things. But that this constituent of mine, sir, who is a healthy young man in every other way, can hardly use his hands, sir, and earn a living to feed his family because he cannot get the operation at the QEH, sir. And there are many other people who are in that situation. So when we come to office, and when we come here to make the changes, sir, to put in place the right personnel and the right system and the right structure to be able to deliver it, allow the people to get what the people want, sir. But that is what we came here to do. And I am very proud of the work that the QEH has done so far. And you know, sir, any health care policy, sir, I'm not a doctor, but I know enough to know that any health care policy, sir, the patient must be at the center. The patient must be at the center of the care. And, sir, I also feel that the time has come, if it's not been done, sir, but it should be done and communicated, where there have to be very clear written policies at the QEH that the average person is able to understand. Maybe simply put, in a couple paragraphs or something, but it serves the hospital too, because it would mitigate risk, because people know, well, this is what you get when you come to the hospital. You will get this surgery, you could get this operation, we do these kinds of procedures, sir. You are expected to be seen in this time frame, and it mitigates the risk that the hospital itself faces, sir. And, sir, all of us, I run a ministry, sir, where we have to abide by in shipping, for example, by the standards of the IMO. All of us have international standards that we are trying to abide by. But it also helps us, sir, to say this is what we are doing to abide by these international standards. These are the standards, sir, and this is what we're doing as a hospital, sir, to be able to abide by the standards. And to communicate these things to the public and to communicate these things to the people, sir, who have to interface with the hospital, sir. And I began by saying that I believe, given the work that has been done at QEH to date, if we were able to better communicate some of the things, sir, that were done, because the work that has been done that I saw is monumental. The transformation that has happened to the QEH, sir, is not going to happen overnight. We're not going to wake up and snap our fingers and get it right. None of us said that we were able to do that. We're not in a position, sir, to come in and fix the ills of the last 10 years or so in a year. But, sir, they have to communicate some of the things that they are doing. And sir, as part of the patient care policy, sir, we have, of course, to recognize our limitations, sir, because the QEH can't do all things. It can't do all things, sir. But it can do certain things, sir, and it has been doing certain things very, very well. I must tell you, I visited as a patient the hospital twice. Both times, sir. Once I broke my foot, and another time I had appendicitis. And both times I had a very good time in the hospital. I could never say that my personal experience in the hospital was a bad one. I'd be a liar. I have many patients who go to the hospital, sir, and who come out and tell me that they had a decent time in the hospital, that they were treated well, they were treated with dignity, sir. Sometimes I've heard people say otherwise. But my personal experience, sir, regardless of the administration, because the moment we try to make service at the QEH a political issue, we do a disservice to the entire country, sir. But, sir, we have to make sure that when we are the government responsible for leading people, sir, that we do our best to make sure that people are treated in the best manner when they go into that facility. That is what I know, sir. And that is why I believe that this administration is doing better than many others. But, sir, I also have constituents of mine who are nurses. I have constituents, well, one, I shouldn't say constituents, but I have a constituent I know who is a doctor. And I have many, sir, who are nurses. And part of our communication, sir, and part of our treatment, sir, I hear people saying that the most important person is a patient. I agree. But I have a view that if you treat your staff well, they're going to treat your clients well. I have a view, sir, that if you treat the nurses and the doctors, especially the junior doctors, well, that they will treat the patients well, sir. I have that view. And that we have to do all in our power, sir, to make sure that we treat the people who work in the hospital well. The nurses, the doctors, the orderlies, the people who come in and clean, sir, the general workers, everybody who works in the hospital. In fact, sir, there's some people who've been working in the hospital so long that they know as much medicine as the nurses and the doctors. Never went to school. In my community where I grew up, sir, when any of us got a cut, sir, we would run across the street. Everybody used to call the woman the doctor, and she used to just work in the hospital. But because she'd seen it for so long. But my view, sir, is that if you take care, sir, of the persons who work in the hospital, sir, then that will take care of a lot of the issues that they have. And so I believe, sir, that if you work in a hospital, your risk must be higher because you're dealing with sick people every single day. And that is why I feel that if the necessary protective gear is not made available to people, sir, we have to correct it. And I know that that's the view shared by the Honourable Minister. That is why I know that we are working, sir, to help people. Those who visit the hospital, sir, when they are in need of care, and those who go to the hospital, sir, to deliver that care. And that is what a responsible administration would do, sir. But you know, sir, wellness is also part of the ministry. Wellness is also part of what the ministry is responsible for. I went to a meeting on Sunday, was it? We went to speak at the sale for site, and the Honourable Minister showed up in his track pants and his sneakers, sir, having come from exercising, sir, because he's living what he's supposed to be doing. So he, you know, looking like a good Minister of Health. But, sir, wellness is part of the ministry. But wellness has to be about the staff too. We have to make sure the staff in the QEA, sir, are well. Because when you're dealing with sick people every single day, angry people every single day, sir, you have to make sure that they are well too. And so, sir, make sure that they have access to the necessary counseling. Make sure they have access to a gym facility so they can blow off some steam, sir. But make sure that those people are well too. And so I know, because I've seen it more than once, sir, that we also have to make sure that the hospital is a secure place. I care about the people who work in there. And many times, sir, we have this situation now where people, you know, I spoke about it last week, people will go and shoot anywhere. We had situations where men want to go into a hospital, sir, to finish off people. It can't work. So we have to make sure that the hospital is a secure environment, sir. But even beyond the manifestation of violence where people trying to kill people, angry people, sometimes hurting people too will hurt people. So we have to make sure, sir, that the hospital is a safe place. And all of us, sir, we had a debate in here about data privacy. And I won't speak to it in any great detail, but we spoke about data privacy, sir. Who is the owner of data? And how much should we be paying, sir, for information coming out of the hospital, sir? Those are questions that will be before the board because we passed legislation in here. How is that going to look, sir, in a modern Barbados, sir? And I also feel that part of the mandate of the QEA, sir, whether directly or whether in relation with the University of West Indies, sir, must be about generating new knowledge, generating research, sir, making a contribution to the debate, sir, on a lot of these emerging issues in health. That our Queen Elizabeth Hospital, sir, must become research-oriented, whether directly or indirectly, but that making a serious contribution, sir, all of us in this room are tasked in one way or the other with making sure that we are innovative, making sure, sir, that we add something new, sir, making sure that we are creative and that the hospital, sir, is not above that, we also have to have innovation coming out of the Queen Elizabeth Hospital or out of the university in association with the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. But that we need to have new knowledge, sir. So I look forward to having a research center that is generating regularly new knowledge that Barbadians know of, that is communicated to Barbadians, sir. A lot of substantial new information, sir. Every day, diseases are changing, sir. Policies are changing, sir. And we need to stay on the cutting edge of it if we are to remain relevant, sir. At all times, sir. And you know, lots of people are getting sick in Barbados. And as a matter of fact, a few years ago, there was a period where Barbadians were getting sick, sir, and we were all wondering what is happening to Barbados. People were dying, it seemed. Lots of people were there was a point, sir, where 4 or 5 people without reason, sir, that we knew of at the time, just collapsed, and many of them died. Many people were under stress, sir. The rise in NCDs, sir. Many people weren't going to the hospital or to nurses or to doctors to get themselves tested. And when people say, oh, that man was so healthy, but you look healthy, but you're not really healthy, you don't know, or maybe something sudden happened. But lots of people weren't going forward for the necessary testing, sir. Many people weren't exercising, sir. Many people aren't taking care of themselves. They're not eating the right foods. They're eating at the wrong times. So that well-being has to be a part of it, sir, but well-being in its bigger sense too. Because an unhealthy environment is likely to create unhealthy individuals. And sir, that is why I feel that we have at all times to take care of this environment, sir. That is why we have to take care of Barbados, sir. That is why we have to reduce all of these things, sir, that are in the air, sir. We have to keep the country clean, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. We have to make Barbados the best place to live. And why I say that, sir, for a number of reasons, but I say that, sir, because I know that when these things happen, for some reason, they disproportionately affect the poor. It is the poor, sir, who are often affected by a lot of these things, sir. Many of the determinants of health, sir, are social. People who have higher levels of education, people who aren't exposed to the highest degree of inequality, sir, and deprivation. Those things, sir. People, those social determinants of health, sir, have to become part of the conversation. It is unfortunate, sir, that poor people are more likely to suffer from certain diseases, sir, or when they suffer from a disease, sir, more likely to be adversely affected because it can't afford the level of care, sir. So we have to be very mindful going forward, sir. I have a constituency where none of it, sir, can be considered rich. I care about all of my constituents, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. If I care about all Barbadians, and so I believe wellness has to become an important part of the conversation. But as I close, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I have a friend, one of my best friends in the world, sir, whose daughter, sir, was diagnosed with cancer when she was very young. And she spent a significant amount of time, sir, overseas being treated for her illness. And luckily for her, she had family with an insurance policy, sir, that gave her up to $1 million US.
Yeah, 15 minutes.
$1 million US, sir, to deal with her ailment. And all of a sudden, the $1 million seems to have gone, and the hospital now has no more time. A young lady who was allowed to stay in the bed, sir, for a certain amount of time, but as soon as the money ran out, you can't stay in the bed, sir. The hospital now needs the space because the money has run out. So that young lady, sir, is now exposed, sir, to all kinds of things, sir, because after spending $1 million, almost one hospital, US, sir, she's now back in Barbados, sir, and it hurts me, sir. She's now back in Barbados, sir, with the kind of treatment that she needs overseas, but they took $1 million, sir.
I remember your speech is so well, but you have 2 more minutes.
Thank you, sir. I'm about to finish. But I know, sir, in Barbados, sir, many of us will go to the very same hospital, sir. If I got sick, I know, sir, without an insurance policy, you know, without an insurance policy, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, that we could walk into the hospital, sir, and you got to give jackets, sir, and that with the limited resources that they have, sir, they will try their best to take care of you and of me, Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir. So I would never come to a debate, sir, on Queen Elizabeth Hospital, sir, and try to say that the hospital, sir, is so dysfunctional that it is a threat almost to human life. I would support this bill, sir, See the bill? I support this bill, sir,
Yes.
as much as the Honourable Leader of the Opposition does. Mr. Deputy Speaker, sir, I support all that is associated with it as much as the Honourable Leader of the Opposition does, sir, because I know at the end of the day, sir, what we are seeking to do is to make the Queen Elizabeth Hospital the safest, sir, the best run and the most efficient institution in the Caribbean, sir. With those few words, I thank you, sir.
Yeah. Member for St. Philip North.
Thank you, Honourable Deputy Speaker, for this opportunity. To give my 2 cents or 5 cents worth, this will probably be one of the longer speeches that I have made so far. I want to say at the outset that I support the bill, and I was heartened by the remarks of the Honourable Minister of Health and Wellness. It made me feel that he's fitting the shoe that he was given.
Right.
I'm also privileged and honored, and I want to say out front that any issues that I have had with the hospital thus far, any reported problems that I've had, and I have passed on to the chairman, she's in these chambers now, she had acted on it swiftly, she listened. It wasn't a matter of, I will get you back in a week. Immediately, regardless of which part of the world, she always got back and tried to fix it. That much I can say. Let me say now at the outset that I will be speaking, as the Honourable Member for St. Michael's South would have said, this has gone beyond politics, far beyond politics. And this area is one of the 3 most important areas in my mind that we need to look at and address. They're important for the country, that being education, the security of the country, and the health. I don't know that one can exist without the other. But QEH still remains the main secondary tertiary health institution in Barbados. We have about, I say 1.5, because one baby hospital can handle a lot of things. There's now a new one that's open, but more for post-surgery reasons. Now, where we are in Barbados, and I agree, the race is not for the swift when it comes to fixing the woes at the hospital. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. But the patient, the average patient in Barbados, and I see them every day, if you mention the word, I have to send you to QEH hospital, many of them burst into tears, many of them tremble, none of them hear what you say after that statement. It's a matter of bargaining with them. Give me 2 days, doc, to see if it gets better. And it's nothing easy to hear. And you will end up at QEH at the beginning, at the end, and most often in between. But a lot of them are terrified to go to the hospital, but you can't avoid it, because it's basically the only place that we have really, mostly that we can trust. We all know, and we have to admit, that the hospital has been poorly managed for several years. Several years. I have hope now that we can see some light at the end of the rainbow with this present administration and the board that is set up or will be set up. As to why it has always failed, there are reasons. I might not know all of it, clouded by corruption, wrong fit of people for the positions. The guess is good as your guess is as good as mine for the other reasons. But QEH used to be an institution that was admired the world over, certainly in the region. People from other countries felt comfortable coming here. I can't say so, no. And I know we're working on it. But as I like to say, in fact, somebody mentioned to me sometime back that in Forbes magazine several years ago that we were mentioned for returning nationals and tourists, that you can come comfortably to Barbados because the healthcare is fantastic. You're hearing differently now, and I want to get back there. But Mr. Deputy Speaker, unfortunately, I have had to walk the walk. So I'm now here talking the talk with respect to A&E, and I will begin. I had a few months ago, I got to experience it myself, and I'll start at the A&E department because that's usually where you start. We need to address the security in the car park. One night I was in there, 3 gentlemen, I don't know if it's a new name for paras now, who did not offer me a weed of some form, 2 of them were mental patients, and I did not feel comfortable. We need to do something with the security in the car park, urgently. To get into the hospital, I don't know if it has changed. My dad, I had to drop him at the door and park in the car park. The distance to get through the one door that is open without a card is unreasonable for an elderly patient, a disabled patient, and we need to do something about that. Increase security at different entrances, something like that. I entered, after I did get in, I entered the A&E department, and I'll tell you what, usually when you work at the hospital for any length of time, even if you have left 20 years later, you do not smell it. It sounds strange, but doctors cannot smell the hospital. When I entered the A&E department, the smell that hit me was tremendous, and I would have been told that the extractor fan, I stand corrected here, was out. Patients lined the corridor for lack of beds, whether they be downstairs and upstairs. These are things that I'm sure that we are working on, but my phone has been lit up for weeks and months from people, nurses at the hospital, doctors at the hospital, engineers at the hospital, the plumbing department. I have left there long, but I haven't left. The triage area worked well. The nurses were short of staff. I'm understanding that it requires about 13 nurses to run the A&E shift efficiently. They operate often with 8 or less. I think the measures that the Honourable Minister suggested with using the space for the outpatient clinic is a fantastic idea, and it is needed like post haste. I waited in the queue in the A&E department for about maybe 4 hours. I saw no patient advocate. Somebody identified her, which I did get her. She had no idea who we were, nothing written down, could not tell me where I would go, when I would go. But we got through, I didn't mind the wait. Finally, we reached the short stay unit, which is a new implementation of the hospital board, I suppose. And it's good in theory. The problem with the short stay unit, though, is that the short stay often becomes days a stay, which backs up the A&E department even more. I think it is worth looking at, not necessarily to stop it, but to reassess it, to staff it, because as it stands now, the nurses from the A&E department are asked to cover for the short stay unit, which leaves the A&E department at a deficit. There's 1 ECG machine, well 2 really in the A&E department, 1 is in the short stay unit, 1 is in the A&E department. You cannot operate an A&E department with 1 ECG machine and probes that are missing. They have, I am sure, at least a few cardiac arrests, and I'm told some people are arresting in the corridors because of the wait. In some cases, I have had patients that the wait was short, which I was pleasantly surprised. So it seems to be improving in that area. But I would love for us to have a look at the short stay unit in the hospital. The nurses there have complained for their safety. You have psychiatric patients to deal with, you have the violent patients to deal with, all measures of patients, and often they're threatened. So security there is of utmost importance as well. The asthma bay, I am told, is basically not adequate. Often patients have to share the oxygen port. I take a turn with my medication and then it's your turn, unacceptable. But I live in hope that this would improve, and I'm sure it's on the cards. The problem, I'm told, with the fast track, we call it what, 24-hour facility now. I like it, it's good in theory, but the complaints I am hearing would include the staffing of the fast track 24-hour unit. They need training. At the end of the day, and I heard the minister speaking about it, furnishing these facilities with radiological equipment, etc., etc. So at the end of the day, these patients still have to go over to the hospital to have x-rays. Some of them can't read x-rays. Even if they find a fracture at A&E, it's not like they go back for splinting. It has to be done at A&E. They don't have issues. They don't have people there to do it. While I applaud and I'm hearing that the numbers for the 24-hour clinic, they are good, they really sound good, but I would like to know the true numbers, because I know for a fact that a portion of the regular everyday clinic was diverted to the 24-hour unit, which obviously would inflate the numbers somewhat. But it will improve, I am sure certain of it. We just need to outfit it properly. And that is critical, even with the St. John Polyclinic, which we hope to open soon as a 24-hour facility. I call St. John, no offenses to the member for St. John, the honourable member for St. John, but it's in the outback. We can't have a 24-hour clinic without the adequate facilities. At 2 o'clock in the morning, you have to be able to have an ambulance to get you there. You have to be able to have an ultrasound machine. You have to be able to have an x-ray. It could save a life. And while I do not mean to dwell on the issues of the hospital, I heard the honourable member for Christchurch West saying that hospital makes mistakes, but this is one area where you don't want to make mistakes. I had the opportunity to go on the wards several times a day, and I'm seeing it here as things being ordered, but I was a little disturbed when lunchtime or breakfast time came. There were no tables to feed the patients. They had no tables that hover over the beds.
Okay.
Forgive me for the name, I forget. To feed the patient. So as Bayesian say, you size round to put a tray beside you. The nursing staff is inundated with work. They're frustrated. So hopefully somebody will have family, or a family of a neighboring bed will help to feed you if you can't do it to yourselves. I sat down and saw many a plate go back to the kitchen because the patient was unable to help themselves. The honourable member for the opposition is looking back at me like he did before. Let us not misconstrue this. I have not joined his party. The bedside tables, which I'm happy to see in the plans, are going to be replaced, because I know I identified some of them. If I had written my name in it, I would have gone back and seen them, and I left there 22 years ago. The first time I made a complaint for the hospital in my life was a few months ago. Issues with bedpans. Bedpans. This is nothing new. It was there when I was there. I have left and it's still there. Patients can't get bedpans. Obviously, nurses are doing other duties. But we have a fear of patients that they don't want to bother the nurses for fear of some sort of payment, that, punishment.
Punishment.
Yeah, and isn't all, I know the nurses are stressed, but like every other job, doctors, they're poor nurses, they're poor politicians. That comes with the territory. But we can't have patients that are vulnerable at that point. It's nothing like lying in a pamper where you are asking for a bedpan when you normally walk to a bathroom. The patient is vulnerable. They need somebody that cares. And I think this is where the funding for educational purposes comes in here. I think we need to institute a system where the nurses and doctors are updated. I think cancer support services offered a course like that lately when the nurses, they did a little course where the nurses acted the patient, so that they got to see what patients go through. Assimilation. And I think it's a wonderful idea to put into QEH every year so that they can understand. Everybody gets old unless they die first. Everybody gets sick. And someday, as the Honourable Minister was saying, you could end up in that position. You have to respect patients. The hospital is about them at the end of the day. I took notes because I don't want to forget anything.
It's okay. It's going well.
I'm happy to hear that there was renovation to the private ward. I don't know how a government could sit and watch. I looked up at the ceiling in the private ward and I could see the darkness, the tiles were gone. This is not us. I don't know how an administration could sit and let this happen, but I'm happy to hear that it was fixed and the ward was renovated so it's in use again, right? Right, so I'm happy about that. Unfortunately, apart from my mother being in there, I lost a relative recently. And the honourable member for St. Michael West was talking about nosocomial or hospital-acquired infections.
Christchurch West.
Sorry, Christchurch West. He made it sound easy and simple and normal, but it isn't. I had a cousin that died partly because the hospital acquired infections. We need to check staff. They're carriers for certain infections. We need to check staff, and we need to treat staff. And he was in the intensive care unit. Should not happen. There are delays in investigations, which obviously put patients in danger, which happened again with my relative. He died. We cannot make these mistakes. The doctor is trying, but it's hard to say, I'm going to do this test on you, and then there's no lab reagent, or something is happening, CT scan broken down. No MRI machine is at the hospital. We all know this is expensive. I hope to one day see it coming. I had the fortune to listen to a gentleman who used to be a previous consul general. And in the last administration, he had said that he had doors open to supply us with some of these things in the hospital, and he was refused. I know it will happen again, and I hope it will happen again, and I hope we will take these people up on their offers, because there are people around the world that want to help.
Exactly.
Barbadians or non-Barbadians,
Yes,
they want to help. They have great respect for the island, great respect for the Prime Minister, great respect for the ministers, and they really want to help.
Unfortunately, it takes too long.
It takes too long.
Too long.
It takes
It has to be
exceedingly long, and the red tape is ridiculous. The red tape is ridiculous to get them in. Now, I spoke to somebody or bodies at the surgery department. The usual refrain, nursing shortage, this is almost, not almost, it's in every department, surgery, medicine, pediatrics. And I had a plea recently on the phone to let the parliament know that the nurses' exodus is not about money. Some of them are leaving with heavy hearts. A lot of nurses that are there do not want to go. They do not want to uproot their families and move to England or Bermuda or wherever. But they're frustrated. Right now, the hospital staff feels that the board, or no, you shouldn't say board, the management of the hospital is not getting to their level. Sometimes it's often helpful to get down on the ground with the average employee. When I say average, the ones that are not in managerial, get down on the ground and see what these people are feeling. You need to do that. It's okay to stay upstairs or wherever your offices is and get reports and so on, but sometimes you need to drop in. I dropped in at lunchtime and I knew these things in one day. But sometimes they feel disconnected from the board, and I'm seeing something here in I wrote it somewhere, about how we want employees, in my words, to feel invested into the hospital. You can't have them feeling invested and that they're count if we don't liaise with them on a daily basis, because there are a lot of issues. There were suggestions from the surgery department about that the elective surgery list has been lengthened because some operating theaters are closed, nursing staff is an issue. So while the elective list gets longer, people are waiting. I have people, not to be graphic, but with fibroids, waiting for hysterectomies forever. These people bleed. Sometimes need transfusions, cannot go to work. So there's working man hours being lost at work for our government in cases. You have people delayed for cataract surgery, not life-threatening, but people need to see. You have people delayed for hip replacements and knee replacements. People want to walk and get around. These are the things we need to look at. A day case unit where you can do short surgery cases and send them home at the end of the day. That might be a good thing to have. There's a call for more junior staff posts. And while I'm on the subject of junior staff, yes, they're hardworking. Yes, and I'm referring to the interns more or less. They suffer. We all had to go through it. The danger comes, I often thought it was punishment, but the danger comes when you have an overworked doctor, mistakes happen. It almost happened to me because I was tired. I calculated the dose for a baby, and luckily my senior came after me, so the baby didn't get, I will admit it. It happens, you fall asleep in front of patients. You fall asleep till you nearly snore in front of patients because you are tired.
How many hours do you work?
If you are on call, you could put in, that's 36 hours. 36 hours, oftentimes no sleep. It had changed briefly a couple years ago when they had a lot and 2 interns shared a shift. But you can be working for 36 hours. Sometimes you have a shift, you have that on call every 2 days at worst case scenario. So you could understand the fatigue these people are feeling. We need to increase the numbers, the job posts for junior staff. And I have to agree with the assessment. I really don't want to offend anybody, but there are some consultants that make the place miserable. The honourable member for the opposition, I have been privy to that information. When you want surgery done, they tell you plain and simple, pay me the money, you'll get it done next week. So said, so done. If you have it, these things need to stop. If you're going to do that, stay out of the hospital, carry on your private practices, and let somebody else go in the place that is about people and not about money. It happens, whether we like to admit it. I hope to God I don't go in there anytime soon and hear about it. But if you are going to be that stopgap in the hospital, if it's about money for you, either you have no right being in medicine or you need to leave the hospital. I will be blunt. That is true. The pediatric department, speaking to one of the consultants too, they're in trouble. NICU, neonatal intensive care unit, oftentimes luckily the parents will assist. There are no diapers. Oftentimes they run out of formula. You cannot run out of formula. But luckily some mothers or fathers are able to bring in this stuff. I'm getting the reports that the oxygen saturation equipment is not working, meaning that they don't have the probes. And short staff, you have 1 nurse to 8 babies. There is no AC functioning in the NICU department or the labor ward. Babies have issues with temperature control. You need to get the temperatures regulated. It can't happen. So I would suggest the Honourable Minister and the Chair look into that and get to it post-haste. Fans are being used now, and we all know what fans do with dust.
Yeah.
And these newborns cannot tolerate dust. They cannot. I recently got a report that rats are on C8. I'll leave that where it is. One of the other complaints for the nurses is that there is little room for advancement. Some of the senior nurses are unable to carry out managerial posts, positions, duties, because they have to fill in for staff that are either not there or on sick leave or for whatever reason. They need to feel that when you enter nursing, you can progress. And I'm glad that we're bringing in nurses. As the Honourable Minister said, it's a temporary measure, but we have fantastic students here. We got students coming out of secondary school every year, many of them interested in nursing. Why can't we do a promotion to recruit nurses from school? Yeah. I see ads from, the Army in the United States.
Yes.
At the end of the ad, I feel like joining the Army. You get what I mean? You would understand, Lieutenant Colonel.
Right.
You feel like nursing is the place to be, is how you put it across.
Yes. Right.
And I agree, we need to do it early from the schools. It's an honourable profession. The hospital cannot function without nurses.
Right.
However you look at it, and you need to make them happy. The hospital cannot function without nurses. You cannot have a nurse leaving the ward sick. I've been saying this for years before now. You cannot have a nurse leaving the ward sick and going on to A&E and waiting for 6 hours to be seen. Not when they could get well and go back upstairs to work. There's loss of manpower. I need to get to the outpatient department. That's a bane in my existence for years. It looks better now, nice AC and everything, you're comfortable. Everybody has the 8 o'clock appointment. Everybody has the 2 o'clock appointment. The wait is maybe on average, on good days, you might wait, if you send your card by an employee to drop it in the box at 5 o'clock in the morning, you might get seen by 10:30, 11. with the hopes that the notes are not misplaced.
They still use notes?
The notes. I waited in there for 4 hours. Reason being, the notes were misplaced. In the hopes that the doctor responsible does not call off the clinic. So you sit for 4 hours waiting for a doctor, miss work, miss pay, the government loses money because the clinic is cancelled. It's not rocket science to fix the appointment system. It really cannot be. It cannot be. Everybody cannot, 50 patients cannot have an 8 o'clock appointment. It can't happen. It should not happen. I agree that it's feasible to move the outpatient clinic to the, is Lady Meek now? And more. Because usually these patients are mobile and they can handle that part. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition mentioned the physiotherapy department. I discovered today that they have not had a new piece of equipment in 15 years. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Minister. The space is small. I have seen patients that got a fracture today, and their first physiotherapy appointment is in about 3 to 4 months. Fracture healed, patient better do it themselves or find some money. The staff are willing to work, but you need equipment, you need staffing, you need everything in the physiotherapy. The more we find out about medicine, the more we know the needs of physio and the benefits of physiotherapy. So the patient load has increased, but not the staffing, not the equipment. We need to address that urgently as well. A lot of things are urgent. We can't do all one time, but triage it, as we like to say, triage it. The hospital, with respect to being disabled, I brought up earlier, was not very disabled friendly. I don't see many ramps and stuff around. Even to traverse the yard might be a little bit difficult, but I am hearing about plans for the car park. What else? One of my concerns is the transition from, it's okay to say we are sending patients from primary care to the hospital, but what happens for the patient when they're discharged or need to come home? I think there's a little bit faulty, it's a little bit faulty with that transition. Social services probably need to be on it a little bit. There are oftentimes the elderly for care that families leave there, yes. It happens. Christmas time and crop over time used to be the peaks. And there are cases where families would give the elderly laxatives to keep them in hospital, it's funny, and not come back, or not give their names that you can find them. What about these people? They can't stay in beds all the time. The geriatric hospital is full. There are even younger ones that cannot really don't, the geriatric hospital, it doesn't suit them. We need to move to hospice care, although I'm hearing about that in a private capacity or semi-private that is coming. So that is a good thing. But the transition back from hospital to the community is important. We need to get that done. That's for hospice care. I cannot leave here without talking about the polyclinics, briefly, because this is not about the polyclinic. But we can't forget the polyclinics. The polyclinics are also suffering for staff and equipment. They don't have enough public health nurses, and we need public health nurses. It's important to get to the community. Everybody can't get to the hospital. That was a role that received new mothers that came out to the hospital to check on them, make sure they're doing well, bed sores, to treat and dress. These kind of things need to happen, and they're feeling neglected as well. So we know that staff morale is down. And I have all confidence that it will rise again with the new Chief Executive Officer. As the Honourable Member, everybody in here says, I think the person that is chosen will do a good job. My last words with that would be that it would be helpful if the board members would have had a history in the hospital. Yes, everybody is well qualified. I have no issues with them, but I'm not sure if board members will replace or not. But having a history in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital must be an asset. I think I think we are moving in the right direction. But it would have been remiss of me not to bring the issues here. It's not brought in a disrespectful manner. It's not about being the opposition. Somebody on the internet said I had a vendetta. It's not about having a vendetta against my party. It's about bringing out the issues of the populace.
Yeah.
Bringing out the issues of the populace and putting measures in place to fix it. Sir, with that contribution, I would like to end here. Oh, one last thing. It is worth talking about nurse practitioners. I'm not sure if we're moving towards that, but something like that will help ease the load at the QEH, because it will bypass the doctor, yeah? It will bypass the doctor and it will help ease the congestion at the hospital. With that, sir, thank you for your ear.
You're welcome.
I want to support the minister again on the bill, and I will sit now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very well. Welcome. Member for the City of Bridgetown.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of the sitting for 15 minutes until 6:15 p.m.
The question is that this House be suspended until 6:15 p.m. All members in favor say aye. I know you all want to talk on this bill. All members in favor say aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. House is now suspended until 6:15.